Okay, what we're going to do is review the lesson 3.2 with a PowerPoint presentation. We'll turn the light off. Remember, these were the goals. Express a compound statement in symbols, express a symbolic statement with parentheses in English, and then talk about this dominance of connectives. Now I'm going to begin with the end in mind here, okay? So here we have the statement. Notice all of these statements here, and we want to understand how you would group them. So remember, this has more priority over a and so we're going to highlight that part, and we're going to group the part to the right and to the left, or to the right or left. Now this is where we want to be at the end. I just wanted to show you that. We could use P, Q, and R here. We could take the statement, I do not fail the course if and only if I study hard and I pass the final. And then we could try to arrange that with the letters. So that would be somewhere we will want to be able to do by the time we get done. So we're talking about Chapter 3. We're talking about logic. We're talking about 3.2. Okay? So here's something to be reminded of. Simple statements convey one idea with no connecting words. That's important. The compound statement, compound like a compound fracture, okay? There's more than one statement. And then connectives are these things that we use like and, or, if then, or if and only if, that we connect statements together. So if I'm going to say P and Q, okay, I can use this symbol to denote that. Okay, it's called a conjunction. A conjunction. All right, here's an example. It is after 5 p.m. and they are working. Okay, how would I write this? It is after 5 p.m. and they are working. Okay, there it is right here. P and Q right here. It is after 5 p.m. and they are not working. Okay, notice the negation here, and notice how I put it together there. All right, that should make sense. That goes together. It comports with what we talked about. Now, notice all of these on this table, okay? And this is really great information that would help you immensely. Good material for you to look at, for you to study, and not worry if this is, less than quality or less than the full extent of what I need, and then wonder if you got all the information that you need. Here you go. It's right here. What are different ways to say P and Q? P and Q, P but Q, P yet Q, P nevertheless Q. And of course I could use that over here with my sentence. All right, here's an example. I visit London or Paris. Okay? Now, what if I'm saying not both? Then that is an exclusive. Or if I mean I can travel to both, you want to understand that to use the word inclusive to understand that you can do both. So a disjunction is a compound statement formed using the inclusive. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. P or Q or both is what we mean by this statement. All right, here's an example. You have P and Q. P, the bill receives majority approval, and Q, the bill becomes a law. All right, could you write this? The bill receives majority approval or the bill becomes law, P or Q. All right, so what would this mean? Well, the bill received majority credit, but the bill does not become law. Okay, maybe something happened. All right, now a compound statement that has this form, if P then Q, if I throw a ball up in the air, then it will come down. If P, then Q. This is called a conditional statement. Now, a conditional statement has two parts. The part before the arrow is called the antecedent. The part that is after the arrow is called the consequent. Okay? If you drive into a wall, you will hurt yourself. That will be a consequent of driving into the wall. All right, here's a diagram. I've got writers and I have poets. All right, all poets are writers. If a person is a poet, then that person is a writer. Very easy to understand with the set theory. Okay. Now you could express this in different ways. You could say all poets are writers. There are no poets that are not writers. If a person is a poet, then that person is a writer. Now notice that the language is showing you different ways, but the meaning is the same. That is the key. Logic is a study of reasoning that transcends cultures. And so the important thing is to understand what is being meant. It's also important to try to get the language down as well. Okay, so here's an example. P represents a person as a father. Q, a person is a male. Sorry about that. Okay, so how would I write this? If a person is a father, then that person is a male. If P, then Q. Okay? If a person is a male, then that person is not a father. Okay? Doesn't make any sense, but if a person is not a male, not Q, then not P. Not Q implies not P. All right, so just like we had different ways of expressing the idea of an and, here we have different ways of expressing the idea of a conditional statement, an if-then statement. Notice all of these are the same, but we could say it different ways. If P, then Q, we're familiar with that. Q if P. Q if P. A person is a male if that person is a father. See how it's turned around? P is sufficient for Q. Sufficient for Q. Being a father is sufficient for being a male. Means this. Q is necessary for P. That's being a male is necessary for being a father. Okay, that means this. All right, this is a very important one. P only if Q. All right, this is almost going to sound counterintuitive, but when you see only if, I want you to understand it as if P, then Q. This arrow means implies, so P implies Q. P implies Q. P only if Q. A person is a father only if that person is a male. Now notice the order did not change here. Okay, so keep that in mind. And then we have only if Q, P. Only if Q, comma, P. Now that's a lot like this one over here. Okay? All right, so know this one, know this one, know this one. Be able to recognize the others. That would be my advice. All right, let's talk about a biconditional. If a person is a father, then the person is a male. Does that make sense? If a person is a male, then that person is a father. Now that's not necessarily true. Okay? If a person is an unmarried male, then that person is a bachelor. Now that is true. That gets a thumbs up, okay, on YouTube. Okay? If a person is a bachelor, then that person is an unmarried male. That gets a thumb up too. So they're both true. Now I could put those two statements together and I could use the word P if and only if Q. You see the only if here? And then you see the P if Q there? It puts the last two, this one and this one together in an and statement. So what it means is both are true. This is a symbol, and this is a abbreviated word abbreviation for if and only if. I know you've seen that before, probably in some math books in high school. Okay, just like we did with the and, just like we did with the conditional, we can also show different ways, standard ways of how biconditionals are written. All right, P only if Q. We already talked about that. We could turn it around, Q only if P, because it doesn't matter. You can go both ways. We could say if P then Q and if Q then P. Well, that makes perfect sense because there are two conditionals. we could say P is necessary and sufficient. Remember those two words, necessary and sufficient for Q. And I could turn that around and could say Q is necessary and sufficient for P. Notice I could write the words out, okay? So the meaning has to be there. There are different ways to express that meaning, and it's very important because people use a variety of meaning when they're trying to present their viewpoint. Okay, sometimes they're good at it, and sometimes they are not very good at expressing themselves, and you'll have to try to figure that out, and it's not easy. Okay, so let's review. We talked about negation. We talked about conjunction, disjunction, conditional, and biconditional. Now, what we want to do is we want to talk about with parentheses and without parentheses. So using parentheses. All right, so P is she is wealthy. Q is she is happy. What does this mean? Folks, what does this mean? This means she is wealthy and happy. Does this mean she is not wealthy, but she's happy? Does this mean she is wealthy, nevertheless she's not happy? This means the fact that she's wealthy and happy is not true. It is not true that she is wealthy and happy. You see, the negation affects both of the statements. Again, just the left side. She is not wealthy and she is happy. Okay? How would I say this? How much of the statements P and Q are affected by that negation there? Both of them are. So you could say it is not true, or in this case, she is neither wealthy nor happy. It is not true that she is either wealthy or happy. Now that does take a little bit for your mind to get around that. We're not used to that. We're not used to being particular with the language. And all we're trying to do is just get somewhat particular. We are not overdoing the looking carefully at the language. All right, so here's an example. Notice a parenthesis. Notice a parenthesis. Okay? Now, what's being grouped together on the left side is this, and what's being grouped together on the right side is this. Could you say it? Let's do the top one. If P and not Q, comma, then not R. See where the comma is? It indicates that the left side is a group. Q and if not P, then not R. Now that's a little hard. Q got a comma, so that means it must be by itself, and that implies that this other part is together as a group. But notice the word and, so we'd have to use that symbol. So as we translate into English, the simple statements in parentheses appear on the same side of the comma. Okay, I hope that clarifies that. Okay. All right, here's an example. So P, a student misses the lecture. Q, a student studies. R, a student fails. How would I write this? Good question. All right, let's see. Let's take it from the top. Remember, this is a group, right? So a student studies and a student does not miss the lecture. A student studies and a student does not miss a lecture, comma, oh, I've got a conditional here, so then I'm going to have to go back. If a student studies and the student does not miss the lecture, then not R. The student does not fail. Now you could say not fail or you could say pass. Okay? So let's look at the wording here. If a student studies and does not miss lecture, then a student does not fail. Okay, if that makes sense to you, then you're getting most of it. How about this one? Okay. Q is by itself and I have an and. So if a student studies, comma, okay? And if the student does not miss the lecture, then the student does not fail. So the comma is saying everything to the right should be grouped together, okay? You know, it's either put the comma here or put the comma here. That wouldn't make sense, so that's the best. But still, it doesn't sound right. Now, what we want to do is we want to talk about dominance of connectives. It's kind of like in Hawaii they have a saying, the big kahuna, okay? And kahuna is a Hawaiian word for the big man, okay? So you may have been in a sport, you know, it could have been female or a guy, you know, and there was the big honcho, or the person that thought he was the big honcho, the strongest or whatever, the most dominant, okay? So here, if a symbolic statement appears without parentheses, then you need to be aware of what to do before and after the most dominant connective. So here are the order. Here's the pecking order. Okay, low man on the totem pole is negation, then conjunction, disjunction, conditional, biconditional. Most dominant, the big kahuna. Now what I'm going to do is, as quick as I can, go back to the beginning. Okay, those were the goals. We just talked about dominance of connectives. And here we are. Notice on the left side we have these statements. Now could you group them? Well, let's take this one, okay? This is the most dominant, so these must be grouped. Make sense? Now let's look at this one, okay? And this one, I've got a conditional which is dominant over the others. So that would mean that the left side should be grouped, and it would mean that the right side should be grouped as well. So the left and the right are grouped. Okay, I'll leave that up there for a second so you could look at it. You could pause, you know, on your video watching and see if the slide makes sense to you, and you could do it. Make sure that you do your work on the assignments as well. So, this is a short review using the PowerPoint related to 3.2. If you study the lecture, the board work, and study this one together, I think you'll have more than you need, and you should be able to work in that assignment. I will go over problems when we meet again in the next class period. Thank you very much.